بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين ولعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Spiritual Perspectives. We've been looking different perspectives, spiritual perspectives in regards to different phenomena. Tonight we'll be looking at spirituality and thought within Islam. However, prior delving into the discussion of Islamic spirituality and thought, just want to extend my condolences to all our viewers upon the shahadat of Siddiqa Kubra Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha, to all of you and to all of the lovers of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam. To begin the discussion, I just want to remind all of those who are watching the program, the lines are open. They can give me a call and ask any questions in English or Urdu or even Farsi. It would be commendable that if the questions are related to the topic that we are discussing. Just a quick reminder of tonight's majalises that began in different Husainiyas and Masajid to commemorate the martyrdom of Siddiqa Kubra. I would mention a hadith from our 11th Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, which says that we are considered as a proof, as hujjat from God upon mankind, upon the creation, and Fatima is considered hujjat for us. It's a very deep hadith. It requires a lot of contemplation. Few things that comes to my mind at present is the intensity of love which becomes the source of creation, because the very source of creation is indeed love, because God says through the fourth Imam in Saif Sajjadiyah that He has created the creation on the path of love. And then the famous hadith that God was a hidden treasure and He liked to be recognized, He liked to be known. The love that He had, that made the creation to be created. And indeed, God and His mercy, as it's known as Rahman, which points out to the aspect of love of God towards the creation. So Hujjat could also be analyzed as the intense love, and the purpose of the creation is because of that Hujjat, is because of the existence of the Imam. And the same applies the amount of love that the Ahl Bayt and the Imams have for Siddiqa Kubra is the source and is the baqa, is the remnants of them, and direct and related to the creation. That's one aspect. The other aspect obviously is the question of the proof. The Imams are the proof. The Imams are the connectors of the earth towards the heaven. They are that, that point of connection, that channel of grace for the creation. The grace of God descends through an Imam to the creation. The guidance comes from an Imam to the creation so that they be guided. They are the representatives of God. They are the Khalifatullah on earth. They are the Hujjat. They are the proof of God on earth. And the 11th Imam is saying that Fatima is Hujjat for us, pointing out to that she is the grace. She is the channel of grace. She is the proof. She is the divine proof of the existence of an Imam Masoom. So obviously there are two things. One is the creation, and for creation Imam is the Hujjat. So you weigh the creation in comparison to the Imam, and here you weigh the Imams in comparison to Siddiqa Kubra. And perhaps that's what makes her the mystery, as it says, Wama adraka ma Fatima. Who could really know who Fatima is? Nobody could really comprehend and understand. She's been symbolized as the night of Qadr. And if you look at that hadith of the Prophet, that the creation wouldn't have been created, lima khalaqtul aflaq, it wouldn't have been created if it wasn't for the Prophet. And then the hadith continues and says, Lawla Ali lima khalaqtuk. If it wasn't for Ali, Prophet wouldn't have been created. And then Lawla Fatima lima khalaqtukuma. If it wasn't for Fatima, you both wouldn't have been created. So she symbolized that aspect of Jamal of the Lord. She symbolized the aspect of the Baqa and the purpose of creation as well, where the Prophet and Hazrat Amir been created for Fatima, which points out to the Baqa of the Prophet is through the lineage, is through Fatima, the children of Fatima. That's how the Prophet and Amirul Mu'mineen would remain, physiologically speaking. However, there's a very deep symbolic reality of feminine reality that exists of Siddiqa Kubra that is beyond our understanding, where the Lord points out to the Jalali aspect and then the Jamali aspect, which becomes that nature, which becomes that beauty, which becomes that mystery, which becomes that source of creation, could perhaps be symbolized as Siddiqa Kubra. Now, in order to continue our discussion, because it's a series of talk that we are having on every Wednesday night, if you may recall, we had mentioned in regards to the Islamic spirituality and thought last week, and we pointed out to that, Islam as a religion is so rich that it has become a source of tranquility, peace, and remnants of many different schools of thought. The differences that occur, the diversity that we see today within the Muslim nation points out to the richness of Islam. Having said that, we do find that certain schools might undermine other schools, but this is from a very shallow and outward understanding. What we have to look at is the richness of Islam, rather than looking at from the point of view that A school is the only school that is correct, B school is not that correct, or it's not correct at all, or they are kafir, for example. This is a very shallow and very sort of not very deep understanding of Deen of Islam. But if you look at Islam as a rich religion which was able to provide so many different schools to adapt, to understand, to interpret in its own unique fashion, yes, it is the case that within these different schools and different interpretation, there is one which is immaculate, there is one which is perfect, there is one which is fascinating and amazing. And that happens to, when we look at the history, is the interpretation of the Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, the amount of richness that one would find in regards to the spirituality in Sahifa Sajjadiyah, in Nahjul Balagha, in the methodology of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, in the traditions of Masumeen alayhi salam, the richness that finds in the school of jurisprudence, fiqh of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam. Nevertheless, the other schools also deduct and derive their laws from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet, but the amount of preciseness that we find within the Jafari school, being paid attention to the ahkam is very fascinating and unique. And that's what it is required today, that we compare and contrast and come to a better understanding. Intellectually speaking, an individual, when he examines different laws from different perspectives and from different points of view, the intellect will dictate. The intellect will allow him to accept what is the best without any bias. No bias is required. If one is biased, then one is very short-sighted. One is very shallow in his understanding of what Islam is. If one is not biased and really accept the truth, and that truth is from Islam, for example, we will look and deal further down the road when we will talk about usul fiqh. We would find, and we had mentioned earlier as well, some of the first treatises that is written in usul fiqh is by Imam Shafi'i. Very good, appreciated, because the Shias never required usul fiqh at that era because the Imam was present and they would go and ask the Imam whatever they have to. Then later on we have seen during the lifetime of the other Imams as well, companions writing treatises on usul fiqh. For example, the student of Imam Rada wrote a treatise on usul fiqh, which was further down, which was later. Then we would find Hisham ibn Hakam wrote a few works on alfaz of Arabic, which becomes one of the methodologies within usul fiqh. So the question is of appreciation and accepting what is intellectually sound, what is Quranically sound, what is sound from the Sunnah of the Prophet. Now, moving further in the discussions of the spirituality, we pointed out to the three phenomena of Islam, Iman and Ihsan. We pointed out to the Tariqah and the Sharia. The Tariqah being the spiritual path, and the Sharia having different sort of laws, canonical laws that are there within Islam. The Tariqahs, you would find Naqshbandiya or Qadiriya. These are all the different spiritual methodologies that you would find, but all we mention, they end up with Amirul Mu'mineen. Just like how all Islamic value, Islamic law, Islamic philosophy, as they all end up with the Quran, the same way we find that the spiritual tariqas, the spiritual methodologies within the Islamic bed, within the Islamic universe, they all regard Imam Ali alayhi salam, Ali ibn Abi Talib, as the qutub, as the leader, or as the main sort of founder of spirituality. He is considered as the wali on the spiritual level. However, on the outward level, they might regard others as their imams or as their sort of khalifas, but when it comes to the spirituality, they unanimously agree that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the wali, is the one who is the friend, he's the one who is the saint of all saints, he's the master of all masters in spirituality. We stopped at discussing the issues that pertains to Islamic theology, kalam. So you have spirituality as a science within the Islamic sciences. Then you have the theology, which is known as the kalam, and this had already started in the very beginning time era of Islam. And obviously we said that the founder of this form of Islamic thought was Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was considered to be as the first mutakallim, a scholar of theology known as mutakallim, a scholar of kalam, he's known as mutakallim. So he's known as the first mutakallim. After the death of the Prophet, questions are raised in regards to the hand of God, in regards to how does God hear, in regards to the speech of God, in regards to the knowledge of God. All of these theological questions started arising from the Muslim companions, scholars, Muslims, and at the same time you have the Greek philosophy being translated and Christians playing a leading role in order to inline their belief system with philosophical texts of previous philosophers, then obviously more challenges Islam face, theology face, and Islam responded to them, answered them on the basis of the Quran and Sunnah. And this required individuals to become expert, to educate themselves so that they could provide an answer to the Muslim Ummah, to the Muslim community. As you are aware that the guidance and the imamat wasn't politically presented to the Muslim Ummah, and the imamat remained, the leadership and guidance remain inward or hidden from many of the masses from the very beginning, and particularly in the early eras where Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba, you are aware historically what happened, then Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, how difficult it was for them to really present the interpretation or the understanding of the Quran, who are considered as the Ahl Zikr, as the one who are to be approached to really understand the deen. Then it was the period of the 5th and 6th Imam that we find that the Islamic Ummah started becoming a bit more aware of the presence of the Imams. The events have no doubt attracted, for example, the event of Karbala, Muslim Ummah, but in regards to recognizing them as champions in knowledge, for example, the 6th Imam who established the university, where you have the other Sunni Imams being the student of the 6th Imam, or further down when you have Ahmad ibn Hanbal during the time of the Ma'mun, Harun, for instance, where time of the Imam and how he praises the Imam. So this came later on. So what I'm trying to say here is that there were individuals, scholars, companions who exercise sound intellectual arguments in order to face the challenges. One of them that you would find in the year 21 is Hassan al-Basri, who was considered to be a scholar, who was considered as a great patriarch of the Sufis. He was considered to exercise his spirituality, his intellect, to answer many of those questions which mentioned earlier. His student, who was known as Wasil ibn Ata, who eventually departed or separated, which means i'tazala, which means separated, and that's where Mu'tazili comes from, the Mu'tazilites. So Wasil ibn Ata separated from Hassan al-Basri. Hassan al-Basri in the year 21 after Hijrah, in the year 21, and then after that he died in 110. He died in 110. And this is the time of the Umayyad periods. So he was there during that time, engaged in debates, in discussions in regards to Islam. And then you have his student Wasil ibn Ata, who separates from him and forms a school of Mu'tazila. Mu'tazilites were considered to be in power till Ma'mun al-Rashid. It's a long period, and they eventually their power kind of diminish when the Ash'arites, Hassan, one of the student of this school, Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, when he separates from the school of Mu'tazilite, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, the Mu'tazilites were famous for 5 things. Number 1, their belief or their understanding of Tawheed. Number 2, their understanding of Adl, as they emphasize on that. Number 3, Al-Wa'ad wal-Wa'id, which means rewards and retribution. Number 4, the stations between 2 stations, which means Al-Amr bainul Amrain. And number 5 was the Amar bil Maruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. So these were the 5 principles of the Mu'tazilite scholars in the beginning part of Islam, and they pushed for this. And from Basra to Baghdad, they were in full control, and Baghdad becomes one of the most famous seat of knowledge for Mu'tazilite during the period of Al-Ma'mun, and to the extent they were so strong that Ma'mun imprisons Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, because Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was against or opposed the Mu'tazilite thought. It was a thought, and he was opposed. So the Khalifa imprisons Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Then after that, as their power started to diminish, you have Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, who rose and founded the new school of Kalam, of theology, which is called the Ash'ariyeh, the Ash'arites. The Ash'arite Abul Hasan Ash'ari was one of the most important of the early religious thinkers in Islam. So now we are looking at the historical development of Kalam. You have this Islamic historical development, you have the Mu'tazilite, you have the Ash'arites, engage in debates, discussions, translation of Greek philosophy, sciences, so on and so forth. But at the same time, you have the imamans, you have the imams, where whenever the community or the ummah gets into a turmoil, into an ikhtilaf, into a difference of opinion that will hamper the core Islamic belief, you have the imam intervening. You have the imam answering and attending to the needs. The debates that is recorded in the Uyun al-Akhbar of Imam Raza alayhi salam by Sheikh Saduq, which talks about Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and Islam and the Islamic point of view, where many of the theologians were lame in answering and responding to these challenges, but the imams were there, they challenged it. Al-Kindi, one of the philosophers who translated the work, especially in regards to the Quran, where Imam Hadi alayhi salam attends to that, responds and replies to that work that he was producing. So we'll continue inshallah right after this short break. Stay with us on the Islamic spirituality and thought.